Good morning, aloha, and welcome to the 10th annual I Teach 808 Empowering Hawaii's Teachers and Technology Conference, sponsored by the Augustine Educational Foundation and Sacred Hearts Academy, Honolulu. My name is Jennifer, and I'll be facilitating this session. We're so honored to have Dagan Bernstein join us today to share his expertise through a 90-minute presentation named Using Portfolios with Intention in the PBL Classroom. Please be aware that we'll be recording this session. If you don't like being recorded, you may consider turning off your camera during the session or simply reviewing the recording afterwards. The recording will be made available on YouTube and shared on I Teach 808's website a week after this event. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dagan.
Awesome. Aloha mai kako. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer, for introducing me and being my tech support, and mahalo to Sacred Hearts Academy and all the sponsors of this wonderful I Teach 808 conference, free for educators. Super honored to be here and share about using portfolios with intention in the PBL classroom. And we're going to be focusing on storytelling as a framework for building purposeful documentation. As Jennifer shared, my name is Dagan Bernstein, and I'm from Hawaii Island. I'm the K-8 capstone coordinator at Hawaii Preparatory Academy in beautiful Waimea. There's my contacts there. If you want to read some more about what I do, you can go to dagan.education, my website, or let's connect on LinkedIn at Dagan Bernstein. So I have a very interactive presentation. I was crossing my fingers for a bigger group so we can get some back and forth going. So I might have to improvise a little bit in this process and kind of honor our two participants that are here in the room for anyone who shows up. And also we are being recorded. So for those of you watching the recording, bear with me as I try and reimagine in real time, which we're all used to as teachers, how to make this 90 minutes of learning the most productive for all of you on a Saturday morning. So we'll see what I can do. So a little bit about myself, because we are teachers, but we also are human beings that have many different sides of our life. So I'm also an artist, a futurist, musician. Music's a big part of my life. Bibliophile. I love books and collecting books and have lots of books. And I'm a songwriter, and also I'm a designer and writer as well. So as we walk through this presentation today, I always start with that lens because I want us to think of ourselves as more than, quote, just teachers. We have a lot of skills and interests that we bring into our work in education. And it's my belief that it's very important that we bring all of those sides of ourselves so we can create learning experiences that are dynamic and engaging for our young learners. So before we jump in, it's not going to be much of a waterfall, I guess, unless Jennifer, you're free to jump in as well, because I know you said you're a teacher also. But I love doing these chat waterfalls. This is something you may have done with all these online presentations. But basically what you do is you go to the chat box and you type in your response to the chat, but you don't send it yet. And when I say go, everyone sends their chat through, they hit return at the same time, and you make a nice little waterfall. So we'll just have like a little mini Manini waterfall this morning. So the prompt is, since we're talking about storytelling, it's what's a story or myth or legend that is meaningful to you, okay? And for those of you who are watching the recording, you can just jot down if you're taking notes. What is a story, myth, or legend that is meaningful for you? This could be a book, maybe an oral history that is part of your cultural upbringing, a family story, maybe a proverb or a tale. You don't need to explain the whole story, right? Just if you have a title or a quick, phrase to describe that story, you can add that as well. So as you're thinking, you can open up the chat here on Zoom and enter in what is your favorite story, myth, or legend. And then when I say go, we're all going to send it at once. So don't send it yet. I'll just give you 30 seconds to think of one. Okay, so if you have a title there, finish up what you're writing, and I'm going to count to 3, and we'll hit return, and we'll have our nice little mini waterfall here of our favorite story, myth, or legend. All right, 1, 2, 3, go. All right, Mahalo, yeah, the Iliad, that's a great one. And for me, it's the never-ending story. All right, and then for our other participants, maybe you're making breakfast, making some coffee. Hopefully you have a story in your head, and for our at-home audience or watching the recording, think about that story. Harry Potter, another great one. And think about the characters of that story, what they go through, their experience, how their Percy Jackson, yeah, how their experience changes throughout that story. And keep that kind of in the back of your head, because we're going to want to revisit that later on in the presentation. Okay, so our learning outcome for today. Oh, to one more person to type in. The Hobbit, another good one. Love it. Oh, these are all great stories. Mine was the never-ending story. That's like my favorite book of all time. So our learning outcome today is to understand how portfolios can be used to tell the story of a student's learning journey. Yeah. We are focusing on portfolios, but really, this is really a presentation about storytelling, because we want to get at the heart of the student's learning journey. Yeah. And as you think about all those stories, there's a journey that each character goes through. So the way we're going to do this is we're first going to start with a little bit about PBL and different learning models, because there are a lot of different models out there. A little background on storytelling and the different components of what goes into a story. And then we'll kind of step into like, what are some different platforms? What are some different tech tools that you can use to make portfolios? And then finally, I want to end with kind of some final thoughts and reflections, and come back to this learning outcome, and also connect that to our own students' learning outcomes and how they reflect. Okay, so that'll be the setup for today's session. And like I said, there is an opportunity. I wanted this to be an interactive session, so I totally understand if some of you, you can keep your cameras off. Totally fine with that. We might just stay together in this room rather than go into breakout rooms. But there will be some time for you to both work independently, and maybe we can work together as a small team on some of these different activities during this block of time. Oops. Okay. All right, so first let's look at PBL and learning models. And since we are a small group, I'm going to skip jumping over to the Jamboard. I don't think it's necessary. I think we can just do this right in the chat, because I want us to first, it always helps me to know what school you're at, and actually your grade level as well. That's going to help me. And I'm looking at different categories that best describes your programming. Okay, and if you want to visit the Jamboard, you can, but I'm really looking at some different models that are pretty common. Are PBL, senior legacy projects, inquiry, capstone. I'm typing these in the chat so you can see. Okay. And INA-based learning as well. And I think there was one more I was going to include there. Yes, experiential learning. And it tried to spell check INA to Tina, and I don't want that. And Kalamai, I don't have the Kahako because I think I'm in Zoom right now, but for INA. But okay, yeah, you can have the Jamboard link, Laurel, for sure. Just give me a second so I can pull that up so you can see it. Yeah, there is the link to the Jamboard if you want to see it. And you're free to interact with that Jamboard and put your sticky note up there. I was just thinking we have a smaller audience. But also for those watching the recording, you can jump over to that Jamboard as well. We can have a nice repository of who people are and what they do. So if you are on the Jamboard, I see a couple people in there now, Anonymous Python and Anonymous hamster or whatever. Grab a sticky note. Um, for example, I'm Dagan Bernstein, and I am mostly in grades 5 and 8, where we do capstone. Okay, so I would just make a little sticky note, and I would move that over to the capstone. Oops, I think I accidentally moved someone's. Sorry, Moana, I call mine on that one. I'll move you back over there. So I would put mine in the capstone column. And so we can just kind of get a sense. If you don't do any of these, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, you can go to none or other. And if you want to include, if there's some type of, I say non-traditional or student-centered learning that you engage in, they could just be unit projects. That's totally fine as well, or an advisory program. Feel free to include those. Because maybe you're new to PBL, or maybe you're new to you're exploring some of these different models of teaching. But it also helps me to know if people are currently engaged in these types of projects. So, okay, awesome. Moana is at Makualani Elementary, and Laurel pre-K through 6. Great. Okay, good. Okay, that helps me because I do work with 5th grade and elementary level as well, and we do use one of these particular portfolio platforms that I'll be sharing that is great for the lower levels. And then Jennifer, yeah, more in the freshman, 9th grade and senior level. So Laurel, senior legacy, that's a term that I know Kamehameha Schools uses. It's kind of like a senior project, capstone project. It's really just kind of a name that they use to define their particular senior project. But I know some schools have adapted that term, in that it's different than a capstone in that it's more about creating a project that leaves a legacy behind. They tend to be shorter in nature. Yeah, capstone tends to be a full year. Often senior legacy projects are done sometimes for a semester or for the final 2 or 3 months of the school year rather than throughout the whole year. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, thank you everyone for sharing. And then again, maybe I'll come back to this Jamboard and see some more people on here for those who are watching the recordings. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to jump back over. Okay, good. That's helpful for me. Oh, hi there, Laurel. There you are. Okay, so I'm going to walk through just real quick a couple of these different learning models, because I want to talk about the project-based classroom, right? And I'm using quotes because this term gets thrown around a lot. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different schools. And sometimes I think it's used incorrectly, and it's used as a catch-all for things that aren't really kind of, I don't want to say true, but kind of pure, authentic PBL pedagogy. Because there's lots of different ways this can look, right? Like, for example, here in Hawaii, a lot of students engage in what has been called aina-based learning, which is often going out, being outside, engaging with a relationship with our land and our environment to create and build and to engage in learning. For example, these are some students at LA on Kauai engaging in building a hale, where they were learning about different woods and different pili and different natural resources they were used. They learned about engineering and science and Hawaiian culture and storytelling. Inquiry-based learning is something that is its own unique entity as well. These are some 5th grade students at my school where they were learning about bees and pollination, and they were asking deep, meaningful questions about what plants attract pollinators. Why do those plants attract pollinators? What would happen if those plants were removed? And here they are taking pictures, trying to capture some bees on these rosemary bushes. So that's its own type of learning model as well. It's not necessarily PBL, it's rooted in inquiry. We also have kind of the pure project-based learning, right? Which is, here you see some students engaged in, this is just a generic free use image. Often they are using a project to demonstrate understanding of content-specific learning outcomes, right? And that could be in any subject area. They might have a learning a learning target in social studies, for example, about a particular unit, and they create projects to demonstrate their understanding of those learning outcomes, right? So that's its own specific model. And then there are the senior legacy projects as well. This is another just generic image, maybe where students are working together or independently to co-design or build something that helps leave a legacy at their school or communicates their experience at their school. It could be, building a snack station or building, replacing the basketball court or something like that. So that's its own type of learning experience as well. And then there's experiential learning, which is really about going outside, experiencing something, and engaging with your environment to learn about certain content strands as well. So a lot of overlap with INA-based learning. I would, in my mind, the difference tends to be more grounded in the actual experience they're having versus the direct relationship with the INA or land. And obviously here in Hawaii, our relationship with the land is very important. And that's something we understand, where in other parts of or schools in other locations might just use experiential learning as a catch-all. So for example, here, these are some of our 8th grade students who did a hike up Lailai here in Waimea to learn more about the geography and the pu'u of Waimea. And by immersing themselves in that environment, in that space, they were able to understand the different terminology and the different winds of our area. You can also categorize that as INA-based learning as well. Okay. So I see Moana just jumped in the chat. I tried PBL when I taught 5th grade a few years ago. We're using PBL in 2nd grade this year. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it is a very great model to use with our elementary school students. And then finally, something I'm very familiar with is something called capstone, which is differentiated in that it's often a year-long project or a semester-long project that is very independent in nature, is usually done at the culminating division level, most often 12th grade, but here at HPA where I teach, we do it in 5th and 8th as well. So for example, this is one of the 5th grade students last year who did a workshop with students about painting and watercolor and how to use, how to de-stress through art. And that was their own project that they came up with, they designed and they facilitated, and it's used as a final learning experience at the end of their 5th grade year. Okay, so I laid all these out. They're different. There's lots of similarities. People call all of those PBL, or they just kind of lump those all into project-based learning. But I wanted to walk you through all of those to kind of show that the terminology frustrates me sometimes because it really doesn't matter. I kind of joke sometimes that why don't we just call this learning-based learning, right? We're all trying to create learning experiences for young people. It doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't matter what model you use. We're all trying to get our students to engage in learning in deep and meaningful ways. So I say that to really try and create a large door for everyone to walk through. I use PBL in my title because I kind of catches people's attention. Everyone knows PBL, and then I pull them in, and then I kind of flip the script on them and say, "Hey, you're all here. You're all these tools that I'm going to share can work in your classroom." Okay, because really, what we're trying to do, I think, the emerging progressive pedagogy is to move from this teacher-centered learning experience with the teacher at the center of the room, talking to the students, and trying to shift more to a student-centered model, right, where the learning is coming through, to, from, and out of the student. Okay, so really, as long as we're using that mindset, I think we're in the right place. Okay, so kind of set that up there with different learning models. We're all kind of engaging in student-centered learning. So I'm going to bring in this component of storytelling, all right, which is going to really lay the foundation for portfolios. I've been to a lot of presentations about portfolios, and they tend to just bombard you with links and platforms and Google this and Google that, and we'll get to that. But in my opinion, all of that gets lost if we are not grounded in telling some sort of story. Okay. Um, so we're going to look a little bit about what's the role of storytelling and what storytelling looks like with portfolios. Because really, a well-told story is a powerful thing, right? We want to have powerful learning experiences for young people, and when we give them the tools of storytelling, it really empowers them as learners, and it allows them to create long-lasting, meaningful, and memorable moments in their learning journey. This is a quote from Nancy Duarte. And she wrote an amazing book, which I recommend. It's called Illuminate, or her TED Talk is something I would recommend as well. And she talks a lot about storytelling, and this is a quote, one of her quotes, where she says, "A story follows a single protagonist transformation, observing a protagonist try, fail, and then overcome." Okay. Our students, that young person is the protagonist telling, experiencing their own story, right? These transformative learning experiences they have involves trying, failing, and then ideally overcoming. So what we want to do with these portfolios is capture this story. These portfolios, they're more than just a documentation of what is learned, right? Again, often I've seen portfolio presentations and it's artifact, 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 okay? That's not going to work in terms of creating something meaningful and long lasting. That's just a documentation of what's learned. That's great. That's fantastic. That's important. But you're basically just creating I call it the digital refrigerator door, right? You're just replacing that refrigerator door we all have in our families' homes where we put student work and we're just putting it in some Google site somewhere. Okay. That's not going to do it justice. A story of the learning journey is really what a portfolio is about. Okay, so let's kind of, I want to dig deeper into this idea of the types of stories that we have. And this is all taken from Nancy Duarte's book, Illuminate. There's really 5 different phases of a story that she lays out. And you can also, I kind of adapted this as well to think of them as 5 different types of stories on a more micro level. So on a real macro level, a student might progress through these 5 phases, but we're going to actually apply it today in a way of thinking about each one as being a different type of story. So I kind of remixed her ideas in her book a little bit for the purposes of a portfolio. So for example, the first type or the phase is the dream. Okay, I'm actually going to walk through each of these in more detail. Okay, and I did forget, I apologize, to put the link to the slide deck in the chat. It is in that, maybe Jennifer can add that. Sorry, I forgot that because I like to kind of cheat and go ahead in people's slide decks when I watch people's presentations, so I didn't want to keep you from doing that. It is in the main thing that Laurel sent out with all the slide decks. But so there's the dream. And again, I'm going to walk through each of these in a little bit more. There's the leap, the fight, the climb, and then finally the arrival, right? Or when the protagonist arrives. So each of you shared a story, right? Harry Potter, Never-Ending Story, the Iliad. And what Nancy Duarte and her team did was she analyzed hundreds and thousands of different stories and legends, and she found that these stories tend to follow these 5 phases, or sometimes on a micro level embody these 5 different types of stories. Okay, so first let's look at the dream. Okay, and I kind of divided this up into pluses and minuses, right? Because each of these present opportunities and also challenges, right? Okay, so the dream, it looks like my slide got cut off on the bottom, at least it is as on my screen. I just want to make sure there is a reference for these images. These are from the book publisher. I did not make these images. But the dream is when the protagonist has an epiphany, okay? How they saw things could be different and they go through a transformation, okay? But the challenge of that is also there's a failure to see an opportunity in that moment or to possibly disregard a warning, yeah? So as I walk through each of these phases or types, maybe you're thinking of a story of a particular student of yours who had a unit of learning they were engaging in, and maybe they had this moment of epiphany and they were transformed. Or maybe you were frustrated because they were not seeing the opportunity for learning growth in front of them and they weren't able to overcome and break through the dream stage. A little bit about the next one, the leap. Okay, right? This is the sacrifice. How you persevered through a challenge, how you took a risk, and how you went above and beyond and persevered through something that a roadblock. Okay, that's the opportunities. The challenge is sometimes it's the failure to change. We do see students who get into a fixed mindset and couldn't let go. And sometimes that limits their ability to move their project forward and limits their ability to take a leap of faith into the next stage, right? To make a project pivot, to take feedback that you're giving them about their project. And if you do have a question about any of these as I'm moving through them, feel free to unmute and just interrupt me. I will not be offended or to add it into the chat. I'm just kind of walking through each of these. I'm happy to discuss any of these as we walk through each one if they're not clear. Okay, there's the fight, right? There's the triumphing against all odds, overcoming those obstacles, okay? But sometimes the challenges, sometimes there are impossible roadblocks, right? Maybe a student was going to do interviews with a community member and they could not get that interview done, or whatever the case may be. Sometimes roadblocks do get put in the way that they can't overcome and they can't fight through. But these are important learning moments and important parts of their learning story that we want to capture in their portfolio. Okay, the climb, that persistence that the student demonstrates. They're making progress towards the goal. They have the resolve to continue. Unfortunately, the challenge can sometimes be the student wants to give up the fight. They're lacking clear direction. They're not communicating with maybe you as their project guide or their project team about where to go or what to do. And they're not able to break through and continue to climb towards their final destination. Oops. And then finally, ideally, they get to the arrival, or maybe this is kind of the personality of their story, is the story of arrival, that sweet taste of success, being able to accomplish something. They're a better and greater person to have taken this journey. The challenge, though, is, again, sometimes things go wrong and they're not learning from those failures, right? Back to that kind of fixed mindset. And they're never able to arrive at the final destination. And as a teacher who has guided now almost hundreds of capstone projects, failures do happen. I do have a mantra that failure is an option. And I see that as a way to help ground students in real life learning experiences. As we know as adults, sometimes things don't happen how we want them to happen, but how do we learn and grow from those is what's important. It doesn't mean you are a failure. It just means that the actual project experience did not manifest in the way that we had intended, and that's okay. Okay, so those are the five, actually, so I'm going to jump to this slide, the five kind of phases or types of a story. So if anyone has any questions about any of those, this would be a good time to ask those before I transition into us telling our own story or making our own stories. Okay, I do see something pop up in the chat. Nope, we're all good. Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you, Moana. Okay, so let's see how I can do this. This was going to be the, I'll put you in a breakout room because I just had envisioned like a full, like 20 people are going to be so excited on Saturday at 10 a.m. to learn about portfolios. But I'm blessed with 3 people. I'm calling you a participant, Jennifer, too. We've got 3 people here. Awesome, great. So there's 2 ways we can do this. We can just do this independently. Since I know some of us are probably multitasking right now with our cameras off. Or we could make one group of 3 and you can collaborate on one story. If you have any particular preference, you can just put that in the chat. I'm happy to just let you kind of independently work on something. It is like a 10-minute work window. Unless if you do want to work with a partner, maybe you can just say, I want to work with someone in the chat. If not, it's all good if we just want to spend some independent time. Oops. I'm going to exit out of my full screen so I can. Okay, so Jennifer's all good with doing either. Okay, I'll give you a second to think about it. Okay, it doesn't matter to you. Okay, I think it would be great, Moana, if you're up for it. It would be great to have, I think you 2 work together because it is really a fun way. I've done this activity in a pair and it works really well to kind of collaborate on one story because it's sometimes hard to ideate on your own. Okay, that's great, Moana. I appreciate that. So I'm going to walk you through a sample of what this activity looks like, but you're essentially going to build your own story using a prompt, okay? And for those of you, if you're watching the recording, you will have access to a link that's a template. And after I show you my sample, I think what you would do is just let the video run because it's essentially going to be 10 minutes of quiet time. And you can fast forward to maybe the follow-up and the sharing, okay? So I just wanted to kind of prompt those of you at home. Okay, so there is, okay, I'll get to the link here in a second. Okay, so enter full screen. Okay, so we're gonna do some storytelling. So what we're gonna do is I am gonna give you a prompt, which is a phase or a type of story. Kind of a student grade level. For example, the sample I have is a grade 12 student. The type of project they're doing should be a senior legacy project. Their class, this particular student is in a STEM class, and what their project is. Okay, so this student is going through the fight stage of their project. They're in grade 12 doing their senior legacy, and they're building a drone to film some aerial videos, okay, for their STEM class. So my job is I'm actually going to use images, GIFs, and media to kind of tell their story. Because I want you to think about the components that would go into if you could imagine the learning journey of a student. So you will be given a template, which we'll add in the chat, which is really just some blank Google slides. And what you're going to do is just build out an image, or I like to use GIFs and a sentence or phrase describing what they're going through. Okay, there are 6 slides in the template. There's kind of, or you can use 5 or even 4 if you want. So this is this student's journey, their capstone project. Okay, so my original idea was to build a drone to film surf videos. I ordered the kit and was so excited when it arrived. Best gift ever. I spent a week learning how to build it, but I couldn't get the video to connect. Right? Tears, pain, anger, frustration. Then I realized I had the Wi-Fi configured wrong. Thanks to my STEM teacher for pointing this out. By the time I finally got the drone to fly, the swells had already died down, but I learned how to build a drone to take videos, because this student was going to build this drone to film surfing in waves. Okay, so this is the story of the fight, right? The student who had this big dream, they had this big ambition, They wanted to build a drone and they ran into these troubles and these difficulties, but they fought through and they overcame it. They worked with their STEM teacher, got the Wi-Fi configured correctly, and they were actually able to build this drone and take videos. Okay. So their portfolio would have elements that would reflect this, this story and this journey and this experience. Okay, so does that make sense? We good with that? Okay. So these are the different 5 story types. So when you're working on this, if you're watching the recording, you can choose one of the 5 story types: dream, leap, fight, climb, or arrive. And then you're going to build using this template. And there's the link to the template there. Maybe Jennifer, if you could just add that link to the template in there, and you and Moana can work on one together. I think you would need, if Moana or Jennifer, if you're okay, actually you could just send it to anyone with link can edit, right? Yes, yeah, so you don't have to exchange emails if you're not comfortable with that. And you can pick a grade in a project, or you can choose your own if you want. And you're going to build your own story. I have a link to Giphy.com. That's what I use to grab all those GIFs. I love Giphy.com. I'm like super obsessed with GIFs. I use them all the time. And you can just type in, like I typed in excited, and you get a whole list of excited GIFs. I would say, I know we have a 2nd grade teacher in here. I would not share Giphy.com with your elementary students. There are nothing like explicit, but some I would say are a little more contemporary and not appropriate for younger audiences, just in some of the content they use. So we as teachers could use them and have discretion about what GIFs we use, but I would not just be working with students and say, hey, go grab GIFs and start playing around with them. I actually don't, even with my middle schoolers, don't encourage that. I think high school is good to go. Actually, no, I did it with 8th graders and it was fine. Just every so often I type something in and it's a little off. So thank you. Yeah, thanks, Moana. Okay, so I guess you could choose. I had the different groups here. I know we got 2nd grade all the way to 9th and 11th grade. I don't know if any of these jump out at you. A social studies PBL project about community heroes, 5th grade science experiential learning project, building a fish pond, planting kalo in a lo'i, math project, or capstone project. And there are the 5 different stories there. I don't know if there's a particular story type that jumps out at either of you that you wanna use. And again, you're free to jump in a breakout room and kind of brainstorm with each other if you would like. You don't have to decide now, but the goal is to use that template, add some GIFs, add some text, and just kind of walk through a story. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is go back to my Zoom here, and I'll just make one breakout room, and I'll assign Moana. Actually, I can't assign you, Jennifer. Is that because you're...
It might be because I'm also a host. I can go into the breakout room though, once you've created, I
Okay.
think. But if you
Okay.
create them, that might be smart because then you can close them when you're ready to
Okay.
bring one back.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, so I made room 1. Moana, you'll go over there, and then Jennifer will go over there. And it's 10:45, and maybe at 10:55 we'll come back. Oh, and Laurel's joining us too. Maybe Laurel can, if she has 10 minutes, can join you and Moana and build this story. As she's... Laurel, do you want to join? We're going to have a breakout room with Jennifer and Moana, and they're going to create a little slide of a story. You don't have to join because I know you're busy jumping around and checking on things, but I will just offer that breakout room to you if you would like to join. Okay, so I'll give you 10 minutes, create your story, and then we'll join back here in the main room. All right. And participant, haven't heard you chime in yet, so maybe you're just kind of passively kind of checking in, which is totally all good. But if you are interested in joining one of the groups, just maybe type something in the chat for me. Okay, so those of you working at home, I'm going to pause my camera and let you work on that slide deck, and you can build your own story. All right, so I will pause.
Oh, hi, hi, Dagan.
Hey,
I love how interactive your presentation is. It really helps to kind of bring things home and make everything click. You're like modeling exactly how we as teachers should be with our students. So awesome. Thank you so much for making it so
good,
fun.
awesome. Yeah. Okay, great. How did that go? Okay. All right. Not so bad. Okay. Um, all right. I want to hear your story. I don't know if someone wants to share their screen. I think the screen sharing settings are all good. Um, I don't know who has control over the deck or wants to share out, but I would love to hear the story you made.
Yeah, I'll share my screen, I think.
Okay, great.
Let me see if I can find it. Where'd it go now? I lost it. Hold on.
Oh,
Where'd it go? Oh, there it is.
oh, there it is. Okay, great.
So we got our first slide done. My inquiry-based math project, our original idea was to have food, fun, living areas, a pet store, and some jobs in our town. But then we were gonna work on this, but then we were told by our teacher that the budget parameters were this. And then we were either gonna have to add certain things into our budget or whittle it down because we didn't have as much money as we thought we needed for our town. And that's as far as we got.
Okay, yeah. Great. Thanks for sharing, Moana.
And then someone put in some extra little pictures and stuff there.
Nice. Yes. Okay, good. Well, I don't think I have control, or you can do a stop screen share if you would like. Okay, there we go. Okay, great. So yeah, the idea behind this activity is to just kind of think through um, and imagine what are these different stories that our learners go through when they're doing these projects. So for this particular student, if they were going to be making a portfolio documenting their learning, we would want to really guide them and possibly use some of these storytelling. So I'm just going to mute you there, Moana, just so eliminate some ambient noise. Sorry. Um, so they have those that storytelling framework to make their portfolio meaningful. Yeah, no, it's all good, Moana. I do that all the time. Okay, so for those of you at home watching the recording, hopefully you were able to build a fun story. I know 10 minutes was kind of quick. And Kalamai, if I kind of cut you off, you're just getting going on that. We could have let that run for another 5 minutes, but I also want to make sure that I don't go over time as well. And so you were doing the, were you using the framework of kind of the arrival when you're able to work through and get through that process and actually have that final project come to fruition? Yeah.
Yeah, that was the idea.
Okay, good. Yeah, yeah. So one thing that I do like to do with students is actually use this kind of template or this storytelling. I'll just give them 5 or 6 slides and have them find images and lay out kind of a storyboard of their own portfolio that they're going to be building before they start building their portfolio. To kind of get them to imagine the type of story that they're going to be telling. Or since oftentimes you're building your portfolio in real time as you're moving through the project process, is to kind of ask themselves, where are you? Are you in the fight stage, the leap stage, the climb stage? And then really point them to finding artifacts that connect to that particular stage that they're in, right? If you are currently working through the climb, right, you're trying to persevere and you're trying to persist, what can you show visually that represents this? Do you have a drawing of how you're going to, whatever it might be, you're going to change your garden project or whatever? Do you have pictures of what you're going to update that shows how you were persevering? Do you have the dead plants that didn't get enough water and how you're going to replant some new ones and get a watering schedule going? Show pictures of those plants that didn't make it. That's going to help tell the story and make it more meaningful when you compare the plants that eventually do grow and you arrive at that end where you're able to grow your plants or whatever it might be. I contrast that with the ones that didn't make it. Okay, good. So I'm gonna go back to my my slides here, and I'm gonna jump into the platforms here. Okay. So hopefully you have understanding of the role of storytelling, and so this leads us into, well, what platform are you going to use? How are you going to tell, or how are you going to build your portfolio out? Yeah. And I'm going to focus on three, and I chose these three. I think they're all different, and I was anticipating we'd have some mixed grade levels, and they're all free to use as well. Okay, so that's huge on me to make sure that we're creating accessibility for all our learners in a public, independent, charter schools, and depending, we all have access to different tech tools, different computers or Chromebooks. And so I wanted to share three out that are all free to use, have very different pros and cons. And I'm going to walk us through each of those pros and cons, and also are appropriate for different age levels. Yeah. So the first one I'm going to share about is called Wakelet. The second one is called Padlet. And the third one is Google Sites. Okay. Of course, there's all kinds of different ones you can use, but these cover the ones I was looking at, mostly that they're free to use, accessible, and work for a variety of age groups.
So I have a real quick question.
Uh-huh.
Are these platforms for them to share their final portfolio?
Yes, this would be, yeah. So if you were going to do a project with your, I think you believe you're in second grade, you could, I would say for the K2 learners, this might be something that you could probably manage as their teacher and maybe have like a class portfolio, and then you're kind of co-building and co-creating with them. I would probably point to Padlet in your case as I go through each one. Padlet, I think, is one I've used with third up into fifth grade. I don't have as much experience with our younger learners, but I think Padlet is the one that's most accessible. And then again, with you as the maybe the guide or the co-creator with them, you could build like a nice class portfolio for them with some artifacts. So yeah, this is what they would actually be using for their portfolio. Like student A portfolio would be on this platform. Okay, so Wakelet, which if you have the slide deck, I embedded the link into the picture there. If you click on the W, or you can just go to wakelet.com. You can log in using your Gmail. It's integrated with most email platforms if you want to kind of play around with it as I'm talking. I like starting with Wakelet, and there is an example here that I'll show in a second. There's a link to an example that I actually built from a student's. I use Google Sites most commonly, but I kind of repurposed some of their work and put it onto a Wakelet. So you can look at the example there. The things that I really love about Wakelet is it's really, really simple to use. To add links, to add videos, and to add images, it's pretty straightforward. There's really just a box that you put stuff in, and it adds it for you. The sharing settings are also very easy and straightforward. There's just one button, share link, viewable by everyone. I mean, it really makes that super easy for you. With that, There's really, the design options are very, very minimal. So if you're really looking to create something that has a lot of visual and aesthetic beauty and complexity to it, Wakelet really doesn't offer that. So your trade-off of getting something simple to use is the design component isn't too built up. And the other thing to also consider, make sure you talk with your educational technologist. And I know with a lot of our high dose schools, this is an issue about some schools might restrict access to certain tools. Wakelet is fully compliant with all appropriate privacy and sharing settings for students, and it's a very common platform in K-12 schools. But I do know that each school has specific security measures that they have. So definitely make sure you check with your educational technologist. But I am sharing a tool that is safe to use and compliant. So if I were to click on a link to the sample portfolio there, which you should all be able to see, you can see there's just some columns. I created a little text box. There's some images of the student that are really easy to add, them meeting with their mentor. Oh, thank you for adding the sample link in there, Jennifer. Appreciate that. A link to a resource they used. This was a student project where they made animated videos about microaggressions in middle school. They included some picture samples of digital drawings they did, kind of showing their growth. Pictures of the student working in the classroom. You can add little text boxes updating. You know, in this particular case, their journey was really about it was taking a long time to make this animated video, to make the drawings, and they had to like really speed up their process. And they originally wanted to make 5 different videos, and they changed that to 3 videos, and they were much smaller than they originally had planned. So that was part of their journey. They were able to adjust and overcome. And then picture of them editing the video, and then finally showing some pictures of their design of their video. And then in the final column here, it's not letting me move my video on my screen. All right, there we go. I was able to link their YouTube to their final video. You're free to watch that if you'd like, and then also link their Google Slides of their final presentation they did at the end of the year in April. So as you can see, it's pretty simple. This is the column setting. There's different layouts you can use. There's a grid view that kind of changes it around into a grid. You can add a cover image. You can do like a mood board style. You can also, there's a compact setting where it just kind of does it more vertically. But that's really all you can do with it in terms of the different settings. So the layout is pretty minimal. I can't change the background color. I can't really do much with the text, but it's super easy to use. I just go into this box here and I click add image. I'm sorry, add text, image, a PDF, or you can embed. You can embed from Google Drive, which is great, and YouTube, Flip Video as well, which is a free platform from Microsoft for doing video reflections. So all those things are pretty nice about Wakelet. So I do recommend Wakelet in that respect, in that it's super easy to use, but again, it lacks a lot of the design features. Okay, so that's Wakelet. This is a good time if you have a question about Wakelet, feel free to interrupt me and jump in or type it in the chat. If there's a Wakelet question. Okay, we're all good. If one does come up as I'm walking through these, feel free to interrupt or add it to the chat. Okay. Oh, okay, and then the next one is Padlet. Okay. And there is a sample there. If you'd like to check out a Padlet sample, that's from a 5th grade student and their capstone project last year on, they made a digital ebook about meditation and like wellness to de-stress. Right, our fifth graders are already like stressing about schools. It's totally crazy as we all experienced, but it's a very beautiful project where the student showed some tools for students to simple breathing or like stretching they can do to de-stress. Yeah. So I really do love Padlet quite a bit. It's super easy to navigate. They have pre-made templates you can use, pre-made kind of like designs that are available. I would say, I mean, similar to Padlet, there's only a few layouts. I'm sorry, similar to Wakelet in that it's not super dynamic with the amount of color palettes and layouts and backgrounds you can use, but you can edit and add some design to it, which I think is a big step up from Wakelet. And actually, I've seen some students be pretty creative and push some of the different functions of Padlet. So it's a great option in that, and similar to Wakelet, just make sure because it's an external site, they are fully compliant for use in K-12 educational institutions, but you always want to check with your school. So I do love Padlet. I think it's pretty versatile. I think it works pretty well in really any grade level or any division. So it's very useful in that way. So let's jump over to the example that I had this one a student did create for their project. So yeah, again, this is Analani, and their project. And as you can see, you can add a lot more in terms of, they have their mission statement column, a PDF. This is actually their final capstone book. They made resources. You can like color code each thing you add. This column with the read when you have time is all their research they did. So you can embed links. You can color code all your links to make it, obviously the student has a very visual and sense of design. They were able to add their I'm blanking here, their proposal docs as well as their product design docs that they use for brainstorming. I had students use this column for their project plan into layout their project plan and then a presentation outline here. I would say that for this fifth grade class, I didn't do as much emphasis on the storytelling with the Padlet. We were kind of focusing on other components of the project at this time. So this year for this fifth grade class, I'm going to be a lot more intentional about incorporating storytelling. But I really wanted to, I use this example as a way to share more about how Padlet can be used. So I think you are limited to per Google account. If you are kind of signing into Padlet using a Google account or an email, I think you are limited to 5 Padlets per account for the free tier, which works fine. The one limitation is I, as their teacher, can't make a classroom. They used to have a free educator account. I think they changed after COVID. After COVID, they gave away free educator accounts, and I think they went back to a paid tier, if I remember correctly. I don't want to, put down Padlet, but I think that's what their model was. But the point being, I can't have a teacher account and just create 20 for each of my students and manage them. They have to make their own. That's why I was thinking for Padlet for younger learners, you could maybe have the class one, and then you can share that single link and make everyone editors, and they can maybe add their own if they learn how to take a picture with a Chromebook and then add it onto their Padlet. Might be a fun way to co-create with the students and have like a class portfolio. But I'm really happy with Padlet as well, and I like it as a nice option for the lower grades where they can add some design to what they're doing, and also add a lot of parts of their project. Yeah.
If I would use Padlet and then I wanted to make, because it is limited, I only have like 4 or 5 that I can make on Padlet. I tried this a few years back. And then,
Okay.
so if you have one house in the class with each column than we use for a student in my class, and they would add just to their own column.
You're kind of cutting out there a little bit. I think I
Oh,
heard you
sorry.
say,
I
oh, there you're
forgot I
much
have
better.
this. I'm so sorry. I forgot headphones on. So if I
Worries.
had a one Padlet for my class,
Mhm.
would each column then be like a different student's name, and then they would just add to their column in their storytelling? Is that how
Yes.
it would be used?
Yes, I don't think you can limit a specific column like the sharing settings. So all the students would have access to the whole Padlet board, right? Um, but obviously it's a good opportunity to share about like, proper digital citizenship and how to, not, change other people's things and so on and so forth. But that is one great way that I would envision that is to create a column because I believe you have an unlimited number of columns because it kind of moves left to right. And this is just for the column design, right? Padlet has different designs. You can do more of a grid. So we did have a class Padlet that was a big grid in which students, it was their proposal Padlet. So you opened up this grid, I'd have to go find it, and it would just be a huge grid with 20 different proposals, and they could all look at each other's and then comment on each other's proposals and give them feedback. So there's different ways you can play with the layout to best fit your needs. So maybe a grid would work well also, where you could have each student's name and be like a box on this grid. You have student X, student Y, student Z, so on and so forth. And then they can add different artifacts from their project that tell their story about their learning journey. Did that help answer your question, Mona?
So sorry. Yes. Sorry. I was making notes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. No worries. No worries. Okay. Yeah. I like I said, I do love Padlet. It's a really diverse tool that I'm always surprised at the little things you can add to it. Okay, good. So I got my 10 minutes for here, and I just have one more platform to share. So let me go back to my slides here. It's funny, my desktop is always so clean when I start, and then you start clicking on things, and by the time I get to the end of the presentation, there's 500 tabs open. Okay. All right, and then the last one is Google Sites, okay? And I do have an example to a Google site, and I believe it's actually a Google site I've been using this year as it's like our grade 8 sample site, so I've been making it. And it's what they use as kind of an exemplar to look at. So it's not a student generated Google site. The things I love about Google Sites is, obviously one big add is it integrates with Google very easily, right? It's all built in, everything connects. It connects to your Google Drive, it connects to your Google Docs, your Sheets. So anytime you have any Google document, it's super easy to get it into your Google site. It all kind of talks to each other and makes it easy. They have pre-made templates, which are very helpful for students. Rather than starting with just this blank open page, there's even a student portfolio template that Google offers in the Google Sites app that is free if your school has which I believe all high-dose schools do have. The Google Sites is built in, and there is a student portfolio template already available. And I think it just helps students because it's real plug and go. There's spaces for images, there's already pre-made headers, and it's nice in that respect. Some of the drawbacks, though, is it can be a little difficult for younger students. We have gone back and forth. We did use Google Sites for 5th grade for a while, and then we used Padlet last year, and I really liked it. We do have a new 5th grade teacher this year who does like Google Sites and has experience with it for younger students. So he's going to be using Google Sites, which is great. Some of the younger students struggle with it. And I guess I'd also add it's hard with tablets. If you have tablets that students are using versus a Chromebook, some of the functions get a little funky trying to build it on like an iPad, for example. The some reason the iPad and Google Sites don't work too well together. And one thing to watch out is sometimes the sharing settings can get rather complicated if students are sharing a Google Doc that they made and it's the sharing settings aren't right. You're sharing the portfolios with families and they can't see it, or you're sharing it with external audiences and you're getting a lot of sharing requests. Trust me, it can turn into a major nightmare. So if you are going to go with Google Sites, just really make sure you are really walking the students through proper sharing settings and how that's supposed to work. So if you would like to go check out the example, you can click on that link. And again, this is just a sample that I made. But again, you can add nice images. I have, we use this kind of design framework with community needs. They can add the reflections. They can link their docs pretty easily. They have a proposal page. They can, again, link all their artifacts and different pictures of reflections they do and so forth. So right now for our projects right now in January, February, we're in this create phase. So we're still building as we go along. So again, it's a little more kind of a website portfolio. I think it's great to introduce in the middle school into high school as they maybe get more grounding in what are artifacts, what are portfolios for. It's a great way to scaffold the portfolio building from K-5 into middle and high school. But then again, I have seen teachers use these Google Sites for as young as grade 3. So definitely don't want to limit its application, but just be aware that even though we have 5th graders using them, it sometimes becomes quite a lot to manage. We got 20 kids with 20 Google Sites with 20 different problems all happening at once. So that's kind of why I like Padlet. I just found Padlet was like way less like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. What do I do? How do I troubleshoot? Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna jump ahead here because I'm not gonna have us play with all of these tools. That was kind of a backup there, just thinking how we're doing on time. So for those of you who are watching at home, keep saying that, watching at home, like what I think I'm doing. For those of you watching the recording, thank you. Play around with each of those. There's links to all of those different platforms, and I was going to have a time for us to play with those and then do some share outs about what they liked about each one, but hopefully you find one that works for your intended purposes. Yeah. Okay, so for these final 5 minutes here, I'm going to bring it all home with just some final thoughts about learning outcomes and reflections. So, at its heart, the function of portfolio is to make meaning out of one's personal growth. Okay, I've used storytelling as a way to make that meaning happen or to communicate that meaning. Yeah. But I would just think as you enter into incorporating portfolios into your classroom and as a way to document student work, keep this as your North Star. How are your students making meaning out of this personal growth and their learning that they're going through? And how is that translating into their portfolio? Ideally, when we imagine schools and student-centered learning and engagement with documentation and portfolios, we would love to see a progression of learning and growth from their start of their schooling till they graduate, and to have a number of portfolios with a number of stories about all this learning experiences that they're having. It makes for a much more meaningful experience in our schools. And secondly, I didn't talk a lot about learning outcomes, and I kind of did that on purpose to really ground us in storytelling, but I could do a whole version 2.0 of this where we just focus on the evidence of learning outcomes. To me, that's a whole separate discussion. Because we are talking about learning here, right? We are in the learning business. So we're getting students to engage with content, gain information, learn more about themselves as learners, but also about the different things in our world. So make sure that they're also showing artifacts that's evidence of those learning outcomes that they're using to guide your PBL experience or experiential learning or capstone as well. We do want to tell a story, but don't get lost in the story, right? We've all read books where like there's no kind of meat to the story, right? It's just fluffy descriptions of cities and adventures and whatnot, and there's nothing really moving the story forward. So don't get lost in the story. Don't miss out on sharing of the learning outcomes. Okay, so just to recap, again, hopefully for those of you who are watching the recording or for our VIP guests here in our Zoom room today, you have a better understanding about how portfolios can be used to tell the story of a student's learning journey. My final takeaways that I hope you have is that storytelling can be an effective guide when building student portfolios. That you're able to identify some platforms that help your students best tell that story, whether it's Wakelet, Padlet, or Google Sites, or maybe you have some grounding on some other tools that you might want to use. Make sure that you're building in opportunities for students to reflect on their growth, their personal growth. And then finally, make sure that you're keeping their learning at the heart of the process, that we're not just getting lost in the story. Yeah. So I'm going to leave you with one more quote about the redream. It's kind of the hidden sixth step. And this quote is, and this is from Illuminate, from Nancy Duarte's book: "You can't stop dreaming. What's next? What vision takes your team to the next adventure, or learner to the next adventure? Celebrate how far you've come, have a celebratory feast, gather your preparations for battle, and begin again." Okay, so hopefully the students, as they complete each unit of study or each project, it inspires them for their next learning journey that they're going to go through. And like I said, they can build a portfolio for an additional learning experience that they will enter into. Okay, so I'm going to stop my screen share. It's 11:29. My time is up. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for your help. Thank you, Laurel, for allowing me the opportunity to share more about my experience, and mahalo to all our sponsors and Sacred Hearts Academy and I Teach 808 and all the wonderful work you're doing.
Yes, and a big mahalo to you, Dagan, and for everyone's participation. We hope you found this session helpful and made some valuable connections. Special thanks again to our sponsors, Sacred Hearts Academy Honolulu and the Augustine Educational Foundation, for making this conference free for the past 10 years. Please help us by completing the survey on the website iteach808.com. I just entered it into the chat so that we can continue to receive grant funding. You will also receive a certificate of participation after completing the survey and automatically be entered to win one of 10 $10 gift cards if you complete the survey by February 4th. The survey will also be sent to the email address that you registered for the conference with. Please make sure to check your spam folder for any emails from iteach808hawaii@gmail.com. And thanks again for being here today. Feel free to join. Actually, this is the last session. So have a wonderful rest of your day.
Awesome.
I have a question. You have to complete a